Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Ruby, this is Ruby Red, and today I want to talk to you about Nonfiction November. I actually don't know about any official Nonfiction November events happening, but I do really like the idea of it. I think it's the right time to get some more learning kind of reading done. I'm we did the spooky stuff, we did the it's becoming fall moment, and now it's deep fall, and that is time to, I don't know, just learn one more thing before the end of the year. I'm just into it, okay? There's nothing formal about this. For me, at least this year, I'm not doing a formal only reading nonfiction in November, but I just want to come on here and talk a little bit about some nonfiction books that I've read so far this year that I really liked and I'm going to recommend to you, and then 4 other nonfiction books that I'm hoping to get to before the year is out. So books that I have already read, I wanted to pick a variety, so these are not the best rated nonfiction books that I read this year by me, but they are the ones that I wanted to talk about. So first I want to talk about This Contested Land by Mackenzie Long. This book just came out very recently. I was grateful to be able to read an advanced copy of this. I had an ARC from NetGalley, and it is an exploration of national monuments in the United States. So I actually did not know that a national monument and a national park were totally different things, but this book kind of explains the Antiquities Act and what that was created to do and what it actually does, and how various administrations have used this law to preserve and protect different natural phenomenon in this country at various times in history. And a lot of those protections, a lot of those monuments have at one point or another been contested for various political reasons or just land use rights, that kind of thing. So the book really explains all that. If you have no idea about anything that I'm talking about, Mackenzie Long will explain it to you. I learned so much reading that book. I only give it 3 stars, but I am still recommending it because I just think that I learned a lot and I was very interested, and I also think that the book really broke me out of my all or nothing way of thinking about conservation and land protection. My personal policy, my personal beliefs are very much protect, and my own opinions on land use and appreciating the natural wonders of the world are rigid, and also coming from a very, very privileged place as far as my own access to those kinds of spaces and lots of other stuff. But this book, she sort of talks to, the other side, people who enjoy and appreciate the outdoors and all of the beautiful lands that exist in this country in other ways that are not necessarily how I would connect with nature necessarily, but it just broke me out of my all or nothing thinking. I feel like I'm saying a lot and also not saying anything, but basically this just had me thinking about land preservation in kind of a different way. It was very interesting. I learned about public lands, public land use, and protection and laws I didn't know about. So if you're at all interested in understanding anything that I just talked about, This Contested Land by Mackenzie Long. And this is actually the first book that I have actually read that is within this sort of subgenre of nonfiction books that I am interested in reading about public lands and public land use and resource management. Some other books are Downstream by Heather Hansman and That Wild Country by Mark Kenyon, I think. 2 other books that kind of are going to be a different aspect of this same general topic. So that's one recommendation plus 2 bonus ones, I guess, even though I haven't read those other 2 books. Okay, the next book I want to recommend to you that I read this year is Bottle of Lies, the inside story of the generic drug boom by Catherine Eben. This book was alarming. I don't remember what video I talked about it in, but I feel like I've definitely talked about it a couple of times this year, but I read it very early in the year, so I'm gonna talk about it again. The book basically explains the history of generic drugs, when that kind of became an option for pharmaceutical manufacturers. Like you have, Dayquil, and then you have like the generic brand of day cold and flu medicine that is allegedly chemically the same, but this book kind of explained some of the FDA rules about patents and like pharmaceutical patents and generic drug manufacturing and some of the nuances of those laws and how they can be misused. The majority of this book works to explore and unmask maybe, international drug manufacturing companies that are not behaving responsibly, that are not making safe drugs, and how they're able to abuse the system so much, and how it's something that is almost impossible to truly regulate at the scale at which things are now existing. It's really rough. Another sort of like a messed up element of that whole issue is that a lot of the drugs that are being manufactured, these generic drugs that are not, they don't have the same rates of release of their like active components, they have like not the same purity of ingredients or whatever, like they're dangerous drugs that are masquerading as safe drugs, are going to poorer countries where doctors sort of know that, when you're using the generic, you have to use either, way more than the recommended dose to get an effect or way less or whatever. And so you just have doctors like winging it, trying to help patients with these like totally substandard drugs that are legal. There is a lot less of that is actually able to be sold in the United States. But yeah, overall, it was a really alarming amount of information, but really what I thought was very good investigative journalism. She really like digs deep into various elements of this, and there were a lot of accounts from people who were really on the inside in some of these factories and doing inspections and stuff. So really interesting, but kind of horrifying. Okay, the third book I'm going to recommend to you, The Secret Lives of Bats by Merlin Tuttle. Now, hear me out. I actually don't care if you think you don't care about bats, because if you read this book, you would. You would be like, wow, bats. Like, who even knew? Merlin knew, okay? Merlin Tuttle knew. But I even didn't know. I was like, yeah, bats, good. We like them. I had listened to a podcast where Merlin Tuttle was interviewed, and he talked about bats on that podcast, obviously. And I was like, wow, bats maybe are more interesting than I thought they were. And then I finally read his book, and I was like, wow, I was right. Merlin was right. Bats are amazing, adorable, fascinating, misunderstood, a delight. So this book is partly like a memoir about Merlin's entire career, how he got first interested in bats. He's like the bat guy. Specifically, he's the bat photography guy. He has worked for National Geographic for like ever doing bat photography. He was like the first person to really get out there and get photographs of bats, like doing their thing, doing their eating, sleeping, nursing, pollinating thing. So props to him. He had to like invent a lot of stuff to be able to photograph bats. And all of that is explored with great comedic timing in his book. So it's part memoir about how he got into all this mess, and but also it just has a lot of really interesting information about bats. So if you don't have any information about bats, I highly recommend reading this book. It was pretty fun to read. Merlin does get into a lot of scrapes. He's just like constantly getting into a tricky situation, trying to find some bats, and then like either getting on the wrong side of a wild animal or like the law or like a gang. And he always makes it out okay. There was so much in this book about just like public education in various regions, different countries, where bats are thought of as a pest when really they're like essential to the local economy and the local ecosystem and the stability of the ecosystem. A lot of desert plants are actually pollinated by bats. And even if you're not going to read his book, I will make sure that I link below his website, which has a huge gallery of pictures of bats, and his Instagram like It's wild. Bats are wild. So that's The Secret Lives of Bats. I love them so much. Okay, and the final book that I read this year, nonfiction, that I loved so much, that I want you to read, is called Deep. I forget the subtitle, but it's on the screen, by James Nestor. If you love the ocean and you're terrified of the ocean, either of those, I highly recommend this book. It will do both of them for you. Like, whether you're somebody who loves the ocean or who is terrified of the ocean, or both, such as myself, I think that this book will make you feel love and horror at the ocean. And also the human body, because wow. The book is about James Nestor. I don't even remember how this started, but he just like, he got involved with these free divers who just like, you know, dive really deep without any mask or without any oxygen or anything. They just like go. Then he just took it like all the way. Like he just kept learning more and more about the history of diving, about people like swimming deeply into the ocean, and also the different things that happen in your body when you are underwater for a long time, when you don't breathe for a long time. It was just so interesting, and also so scary. It's definitely not something that everyone can do, but I think reading about free diving is something everyone can and should do. If you are only going to read one nonfiction book this year, honestly, it should be this one. It was fantastic. It was so interesting, and it just covered so many different things. The book is written in chapters that are corresponding to elevation. So you start off kind of near the surface of the ocean, and then you go deeper and deeper, and like how deep life can go, and so much wild stuff happens. And yeah, the most fascinating thing to me was definitely how the body reacts to that change in pressure, temperature, and oxygen availability, and how the heart rate can do all this wild stuff. It just was wild, okay? I'm not gonna tell you the whole book. You should just read it. It was so good. Okay, now let's talk about some of my hopefuls, some priorities, I guess, for the rest of 2022. I'm not saying I'm gonna read all of these in November. I'm hopefully gonna read at least one of them in November. I definitely want to be taking a bigger bite of nonfiction over fiction in the next month, because especially like in October, I read so much fantasy. So I really wanna soak up some nonfiction. I actually have a separate want to read shelf on Goodreads. I have like 270 books on my want to read shelf on Goodreads, and then I have a separate nonfiction want to read shelf that has like 90 books on it. So there's a lot there to choose from. Feel free to peruse if you want. My Goodreads is always linked below. But these are just 4 of the books that I am the most interested in, like at this exact moment. First up, The Arbonaut. Now, oh my god, I think I talked about this book, Nonfiction November, last year, so that's annoying that I still haven't read it. And I'll be honest with you, I ran out and I bought it when it first came out because I was so excited about it, and I should have waited for the paperback to come out. I don't even know if it came out in paperback, but yeah, the reason I haven't read it yet is because whenever I want to pick up a book, I'm just like, ugh, I don't want to pick up that hardback book. I'm so annoyed by myself for doing that. But here we are, The Arbonaut, which is kind of a memoir. It's one of my favorite genres, a science memoir. So it's about Meg Lowman. She's the author, and it's about how she got interested in, or got going in her field, which is the study of the canopy of trees. And she actually calls it the 8th continent because it's a whole other world up there, a whole other ecosystem. And she is, I think, like a pioneer in studying that realm. And she has worked with not only like a lot of like science stuff, understanding what's going on up there, but she's also done a lot of work with conservation efforts in different like rainforest regions around the world. So it's absolutely 100% up my alley, and I can't wait to read it. I hope I read it. Another one of these books, one of my hopefuls that I suspect is going to become a favorite, and I suspect this because another one of this author's books is a favorite, and I was gonna recommend that in the first portion of this video, but I was like, you know what, Ruby, you talk about Into Thin Air in every video. We don't need to do it again. But if you haven't read Into Thin Air, obsessed, amazing, so good. And a hopeful for me for the rest of the year is that I will actually finally read Under the Banner of Heaven by Jon Krakauer. This book is sort of about extreme religious groups, extreme faith, specifically fundamentalist Mormon churches and groups. But this is classified as a true crime novel because it does get into some crimes. And I actually don't know that much more about it, and I am deliberately keeping it that way for myself so that I just like can enjoy it, and then after I read it I'll be able to watch the series. But yeah, I am hoping to read that this year because I absolutely I was totally gone for Into Thin Air. I loved it so much. So I'm really interested to get a taste of what that same style of writing can bring to such a different kind of extreme, you know, like extreme weather and physical feats of Mount Everest, which is Into Thin Air, versus like extreme fundamentalist faith. So yeah, I want to read that. Okay, another book I'm really interested in reading, and I feel like my mom told me about this book, like sent me something about it on Instagram, and I was fascinated, but I don't think my library has it, so I'll have to just like get my hands on a copy somewhere. And that is Regenesis, Feeding the World Without Devouring the Planet by George Monbois, I believe. And I don't super know that much about this one either, to be honest, but basically the gist is that farming is the biggest cause of environmental destruction on the planet, and yet millions of people are starving. So how is that? You know? So I think that this book is kind of like, how did we get here? How did we create this system that is like so not working? And how can it be fixed before like the earth can't support any of us at all? I'm hoping that this book will have a lot of ideas about how our farming and food systems can kind of be adjusted so that they are able to better serve everyone, not just a smaller amount of wealthier white countries and people. So yeah, I hope that I can get my hands on that somehow, and then read it and learn something, and hopefully in a good way. And the final book, the final hopeful for me for nonfiction rest of the year, but that I might read in Nonfiction November, because I do have a hold for this one at my library, and that is How to Read Now by Elaine Castillo. This is a collection of essays about how to read and I think consume media in general with one eye on your own personal moral and ethical standards of behavior. Basically, how to read and enjoy books, etc., without being able to, or like requiring yourself to separate the art from the artist, right? And how to just engage with media critically in a more meaningful way than just like product of the times. So I think that this is going to have some important things to say, and it's also something that I have often struggled with in my journey as like a reader and a person in the world, just like how to balance reading for like pleasure, enjoyment, fun, engaging, but also, you know, not ignoring troublesome, problematic, racist, colonialist undertones or backgrounds of authors and their work. So I think that's kind of like generally what the book is about. And I'm very interested to read it because yeah, that's something that I really struggle with navigating, and so I'm hoping to read these essays that will give me some other perspectives, some other ideas. So those are 4 books that I recommend to you for Nonfiction November, and 4 books that I'm thinking about reading for Nonfiction November. I will just let you know what happened at the end of the month. And please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you're gonna read for Nonfiction November, if anything, or what some of your favorite nonfiction from this year has been. I would love to know. I'd love to add it to my TBR, or just to chat with you about it. So thank you so much for watching. Thanks for every like, comment, and subscribe. They really mean a lot to me. I hope you enjoyed getting to hear some of my thoughts on some nonfiction works, and I will see you back here next week for another video. Goodbye.